Oh shit, oh.
A little girl is kidnapped in Los Angeles, and the clock starts ticking. Her father brings in the only man he trusts from Hong Kong. And when they start digging into the case, they realize the kidnapping is just the beginning of something far more dangerous. At the beginning of the movie, we see Detective Inspector Lee leading a raid with the Hong Kong police force on a ship. Their goal is to arrest the crime lord Juntao. However, Lee only manages to capture Sang, Juntao's right-hand man. Juntao himself escapes from the scene. Meanwhile, Chinese consul Solon Han shares the news of this victory with his friend, British Commander Thomas, and they celebrate the arrest. After this, Lee meets Su Young, who is Consul Han's daughter. She tells Lee that she does not want to go to America with her father. To comfort her, Lee gives her a pendant and reassures her that there is nothing to worry about and that everything will be fine. The story then shifts to Los Angeles, where we see an undercover operation. A man named James Carter is posing as a buyer, while another man shows him C4 explosives that he wants to sell. At that moment, two local police officers arrive and order them to put their hands up. Carter secretly signals the officers to leave, trying to maintain his cover. However, Clive suddenly opens fire on the officers and attempts to escape. Carter then starts shooting at Clive's car. Just before the car explodes, Clive jumps out of it. Carter then approaches him and reveals that he is an undercover police officer with the LAPD, and he arrests Clive. Meanwhile, Consul Han and Su Young have already arrived in Los Angeles. Han is on his way to drop Su Young at her school when one of his workers informs him that he has received a phone call from China. So, Han sends Su Young to school with her bodyguards while he goes to answer the call. But when he picks up the phone, the call is suddenly disconnected. On the other side, Han's daughter Su Young is kidnapped by Sang while on her way to school. The FBI officers soon inform Consul Han about the kidnapping. They assure him that they will handle the case and bring Su Young back safely. However, Consul Han tells them that he has already called Inspector Lee to help with the investigation. But FBI High Agent Russ does not want Lee involved in the case. To keep him away, Russ calls the LAPD and assigns Detective James Carter a task. Carter is told that the FBI needs his help, but in reality, his job is to keep Inspector Lee as far away from the case as possible until it is solved.
I'm FBI, you understand?
When Carter meets Lee for the first time, he tries to talk to him, but Lee remains quiet. Carter then calls his boss to explain the situation. His boss tells him clearly that he must keep Lee away from the investigation. Otherwise, he will face 2 months of suspension without pay. After hearing this, Carter decides that he will solve the case himself. To gather information, Carter meets one of his informants named Stucky. Stucky tells him that an unknown person has been secretly buying large amounts of firearms and weapons. Carter records this information. Later, Carter handcuffs Lee to the steering wheel of his car and goes inside a restaurant to get some food. When he comes back outside, he is shocked to see that Lee has escaped. Lee then manages to make his way to Consul Han's location. The guards stop him at the gate, but Lee quickly knocks one of them down and forces his way inside the embassy. There, he finally meets Consul Han face to face.
I would like you to meet Detective Inspector Lee.
Excuse me very much.
Meanwhile, Carter arrives at the embassy with his damaged car, and an FBI officer starts scolding him for his mistake. At that moment, Lee tells Consul Han that Carter is helping him find Su Young, which helps Carter avoid getting into more trouble. Soon after, the kidnappers call. During the call, Sang demands $50 million and instructs them to deliver the money to a specific building. The FBI traces the call and quickly identifies the location. They immediately send a team of officers to raid the building. However, Lee senses that something is wrong.
Mr. Russ, you must put your man back.
What the hell are you doing here? Where's Carter?
But Russ ignores Lee's concerns. Moments later, a massive explosion occurs inside the building, killing the FBI officers who had entered. Right after the explosion, Lee notices Sang nearby and begins chasing him. Carter also follows Lee during the pursuit. Sang manages to escape into an abandoned building, where he suddenly attacks Lee. While trying to escape again, Sang runs onto a bridge, but he slips and falls. During the fall, a detonator drops out of his pocket. Lee also falls onto the bridge while chasing him and tells Carter to stop, but Carter doesn't listen. The bridge collapses, and both Lee and Carter fall down. Meanwhile, Sang escapes in a car. However, Lee manages to recover the detonator that Sang dropped. Later, Lee and Carter go to the FBI headquarters to investigate the device. They show the detonator to Agent Johnson, who tells them that it is used for C4 explosives. After learning this, Lee realizes that Sang might be connected to a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. Following this lead, Lee and Carter go to Chinatown and begin watching the restaurant closely to gather more information. Sang also calls Consul Han and instructs him to deliver the ransom money to the same restaurant. After that, Carter shows his ID to Lee and decides to enter the restaurant first. Inside, he tells the staff that he is Juntao's lawyer and that he has come to meet him. A waitress goes upstairs to inform Sang. There, it is revealed that Juntao is actually Consul Han's friend, British Commander Thomas. Thomas orders Sang to move Su Young to another location and to deal with Carter. Meanwhile, Lee arrives at the restaurant and notices something important. He sees the pendant he had given to Su Young around a waitress's neck. At the same time, Sang orders his men to torture Carter and kill him, and then he leaves the place. However, Lee manages to save Carter, and the two of them try to escape the restaurant while dodging gunfire. During the chaos, Lee snatches the pendant from the waitress. Suddenly, a huge explosion occurs in the restaurant, but Lee and Carter manage to escape. Soon after, FBI agents arrive at the scene and blame Lee and Carter for ruining their ransom exchange plan. FBI Agent Russ removes them from the case. Lee is then informed that he will be sent back to Hong Kong. Before leaving, Lee apologizes to Consul Han and tells him that Juntao is responsible for Su Young's kidnapping. However, Han is disappointed and decides to pay the ransom, which has now increased from $50 million to $70 million. Carter apologizes to Lee for his earlier behavior, and Lee sadly leaves for the airport. But Carter soon realizes his mistake. Instead of staying away from the case, he decides that he will help rescue Su Young. First, Carter apologizes to bomb specialist Johnson and asks for her help. Then he rushes to the airport, boards Lee's plane, and convinces him to come back and continue the mission. Carter explains that his father died during a traffic stop because his partner failed to help him, which is why he never wanted to work with a partner. Hearing this, Lee decides to team up with Carter to save Su Young. Meanwhile, Thomas visits Consul Han and advises him to trust the FBI for the ransom exchange. That evening, the FBI arranges the exchange at a Chinese cultural exhibition. Consul Han begins giving a speech at the event. At the same time, Lee, Carter, and Johnson arrive at the exhibition. Carter creates a disturbance to get people to leave the exhibition hall.
Do you hear what I just said? Get your shit and go out the door! Hurry up, get your hell out of here! It's a bomb in the building!
I don't believe this.
During the chaos, Lee sees Sang handing a detonator to Thomas. As Lee runs toward them, shouting, "Juntao!" Thomas threatens everyone by holding up the detonator and saying that if anyone tries to stop him, he will blow everything up. While everyone is distracted, Carter quietly slips outside and checks a van parked nearby, where he finds Su Young. She is wearing a C4 explosive vest. Carter tries to remove it, but she warns him that the vest will explode if anyone tries to take it off. Carter quickly takes Su Young into the van, where Johnson carefully removes the explosive vest. Meanwhile, Carter gets involved in a gunfight and tells Lee to go after Thomas. Thomas runs to the top of the building, entering the control room, where he shoots several FBI agents and injures Agent Russ. He grabs the bag full of money and heads toward the helicopter waiting on the rooftop. Lee continues chasing him. At the same time, Sang enters the control room and begins putting the remaining money into another bag. Carter arrives and Sang challenges him to drop his gun and fight. As soon as they drop their guns, Carter secretly pulls out a second hidden gun and shoots Sang. On the rooftop, Thomas fires repeatedly at Lee. Lee narrowly avoids the bullets, but slips and ends up hanging from the edge of the building. Thomas tries to knock him off using the money bag, but the bag opens and the money flies into the air. Thomas also loses his balance and slips, grabbing Lee's jacket to save himself. However, the jacket tears and Thomas falls to his death. Now Lee also begins to lose his grip and shouts for Carter's help. At first, Carter hesitates out of habit, but finally he manages to save Lee using a banner hanging from the building. Lee thanks Carter with a hug. Soon after, Soo Young reunites with her father, and she even scolds Lee for arriving late before returning the pendant to him. Later, Consul Han rewards Lee and Carter with first-class tickets to Hong Kong for a vacation. Carter initially refuses and says he prefers to stay in Los Angeles. But in the end, the two partners board the flight to Hong Kong together. And with that, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and comment.